The weight of silence. Gravel popped and scattered as Michael steered into the long drive, twin beams slicing through the encroaching gloom. The farmhouse rose before him, a dark monolith against the plum-colored sky. Unchanged. The clapboard, silvered with age, the porch swing askew on its chain, rampant rose bushes clutching at the siding like grasping claws. A queasy blend of sorrow and a deeper, unsettling guilt churned in his stomach. The engine died, leaving a void filled only by the stridulation of crickets and the distant bellow of cattle. He lingered, hands locked on the wheel, a creeping chill invading the car's interior despite the balmy air. Years of unsaid words, a leaden weight, pressed against him. 3 years since his last, volcanic argument with his father, a clash that ended in slammed doors and stinging barbs. He never intended it to be the final exchange. He had always envisioned, far down the line, a reconciliation, a quiet understanding dawning between them. Now, only silence echoed. Finally, he forced the car door open, the metallic click sharp in the stillness. The air hung thick with the mingled scents of damp earth and wood smoke, both familiar and alien. It was the scent of his boyhood, of endless summer days spent roaming the fields and woods surrounding the farm, but now soured by the taste of resentment and regret. He moved towards the house, his pace measured, almost reluctant. The porch light stuttered, painting long, erratic shadows. He could discern voices within, hushed and subdued. Family. Friends. People who had shared his father's life, witnessed it in ways he hadn't. He reached the door, hesitating, his fingers hovering above the tarnished brass. What could he possibly say? How to behave? He felt like an outsider, a specter returning to haunt a place from which he'd long been estranged. Drawing a fortifying breath, he turned the knob and pushed inward. A wave of heat, almost palpable, enveloped him, a welcome contrast to the evening's chill. The air inside carried the mingled fragrances of roasting meat and lilies, an odd yet fitting aroma. The living room buzzed with people, their faces etched with grief. He recognized aunts, uncles, cousins, neighbors, all assembled to offer their condolences. An abrupt hush fell as he entered. A sea of faces turned towards him, scrutinizing his every move. Heat flooded his cheeks, his heart hammering against his ribs. He hadn't anticipated this. He'd imagined slipping in unnoticed, a silent observer. His Aunt Susan broke the stillness. She hurried forward, her eyes swollen and red, and enveloped him in a hug. "Michael," she murmured, her voice thick with emotion. "We're so thankful you came." He mumbled a reply, at a loss for words. He returned the embrace awkwardly, feeling the weight of her loss. His gaze swept the room, seeking a friendly face, an anchor in this turbulent sea of sorrow. He spotted Sarah Jenkins near the fireplace, her dark eyes fixed on him with a quiet intensity. Sarah had been a constant in his life, a childhood confidant who'd always been present, an astute observer who seemed to understand him better than most. He hadn't seen her in years, not since he'd left for college and his old life had slowly receded from view. He made his way toward her, threading through the thronged room, nodding to faces he barely remembered. He could feel their gazes, assessing him, questioning his absence. He avoided their eyes, focusing on Sarah's face, her familiar smile a warm light in the gloom. "Michael!" She greeted him softly, her voice a soothing balm. "It's good to see you." "You too, Sarah," he replied, managing a weak smile. "It's been a long time." "Indeed," she said, her gaze unwavering. "How are you holding up through all of this?" He shrugged, unsure how to respond. "As well as can be expected, I suppose." She didn't press, sensing his unease. "He talked about you," she confided quietly, her voice barely audible. He tensed, his stomach nodding. "He did?" She nodded. "He often wondered how you were. He missed you dearly." The words hung between them, laden with unsaid meaning. He averted his gaze, unable to meet her eyes. He recalled their final argument, the cutting words, the accusations, the sense of irreparable damage. He'd been so angry, so intent on asserting his independence, proving he was his own person. Now only remorse remained. "I should go say hello to everyone," he mumbled, turning from her. He drifted through the house, a ghost revisiting his former life. He passed his childhood bedroom, the walls still adorned with faded posters of his favorite sports teams. He saw the kitchen, where his mother used to bake and sing along to the radio. He saw the den, where his father would recline in his armchair, immersed in the newspaper and his pipe. Each room was a stark reminder of what he'd lost, of the wasted years. He stopped outside his father's study, the door slightly ajar. He hesitated, his hand hovering over the knob. He hadn't been in this room for years. It had been his father's refuge, a place for quiet contemplation. He pushed the door inward and stepped inside. The room remained as he remembered it, overflowing with books and papers, the air imbued with the scent of aged leather and pipe tobacco. His father's desk dominated the center of the room, piled high with documents and photographs. He approached it and ran his hand over the smooth surface. He picked up a framed photograph of himself and his father, taken during his childhood. He was beaming, his arms slung around his father's shoulder. His father was smiling, too, a rare and genuine expression he hadn't witnessed in years. He stared at the photograph, tears stinging his eyes. He hadn't realized the depth of his longing, the extent of his loss. He placed the photograph back on the desk and turned to leave, overwhelmed by the flood of memories and regret. He couldn't remain in that room, not for another moment. It was too much, too painful. As he reached the door, he noticed something lying on the desk, a small, well-worn Bible. It was his father's, the one he always kept close. He picked it up, the leather softened and faded from years of use. He opened it, the pages delicate and yellowed. A folded piece of paper fluttered out, falling to the floor. He bent and retrieved it, his heart pounding in his chest. He unfolded the paper, his hands trembling. It was a letter, penned in his father's unmistakable handwriting. Dust motes and memories. The house breathed lemon polish and aged timber, a scent so ingrained it possessed a near-corporeal weight. Michael glided through the corridor, his footfalls amplified by the eerie stillness. He hesitated at the living room threshold. Sunlight, diffused by the lacy shears, patterned the time-worn rug with squares of luminosity. There it stood. His father's armchair. The leather, once a deep chocolate hue, now bore the cracks and pallor of age, conforming to a form long absent. Its emptiness screamed within the familiar arrangement of the room. He recalled countless evenings within those walls, the miasma of pipe smoke hanging heavy, underscored by the news anchor's drone. His father, a man of few words but granite convictions, had held dominion from that throne. Michael's grip tightened on the doorframe. It had been over half a decade since he'd last occupied this space, since he'd last faced his father. 5 years of self-imposed exile. A memory flared, unexpected and piercing. He was 22, freshly minted from architecture school, bursting with visions. He'd returned to announce his move to the city, an internship with a celebrated visionary. Architecture? His father's voice, a subterranean rumble, had vibrated through the room. He hadn't even glanced up from his paper. What good is that? This farm needs you, Michael. It's been in the family for generations. I can't, Dad. I'm no farmer. It's in your blood. The newspaper cracked like a gunshot. This land, this house, it's all you'll ever need. It's your dream, not mine. The words felt gritty in his mouth. The argument detonated, a predictable explosion of long-held grievances. Recriminations flew like shrapnel, ripping open healed-over wounds. Michael had fled, swearing an oath of no return. A vow stubbornly honored. Golden dust motes pirouette in the sun's rays, mocking his painstakingly constructed life, his successes, his carefully nurtured detachment. He'd forged a life, a career, but at what sacrifice? The silence between them had deepened into a canyon, seemingly unbridgeable. He retreated from the living room, his chest constricted. The kitchen beckoned next, the heart of their home. He pictured his mother, a whirlwind around the stove, humming an off-key tune. The yeasty fragrance of baking bread, the oven's glow, the reassuring percussion of cookware. Now, the space was clinical, antiseptically clean. His aunt had scrubbed it raw, erasing any trace of his father's existence. He opened the refrigerator. Its hum was the sole audible note. A solitary jar of pickled cucumbers occupied the top shelf, swimming in murky verdancy. His father had possessed an insatiable craving for them. He'd consumed them directly from their jar, the vinegar bringing tears to his eyes. Michael slammed the door. He was suffocating. He needed open air. He stepped onto the porch, the waning sun warming his face. The atmosphere stood still, broken only by the distant mechanical thrum of a tractor in a neighboring field. He leaned against the railing, gazing out at the familiar vista. The undulating hills, the patchwork of cultivated fields, the ancient oak, a stoic guardian at the property's edge. Every contour, every shadow was etched in his memory. It was a part of him, whether he acknowledged it or not. Beautiful, isn't it? He pivoted to face Sarah, her expression tender with understanding. She joined him at the railing, her gaze mirroring his. It hasn't changed, he observed, his tone devoid of inflection. Some things never do. She paused, considering her words. He missed you, Michael. More than he ever let on. He offered a hollow laugh. He had a curious way of conveying it. He was a proud man. Obstinate, Michael countered. And implacable. He wasn't always that way. Sarah tucked a stray lock of hair behind her ear. He had his own peculiar methods. His own peculiar methods of alienating everyone. He turned from her, his focus fixed on the horizon. He sought no pity. He didn't merit it. Don't do that, Michael. Her voice was soft yet firm. He remained silent. Don't shut me out. Not now. She extended a hand, touching his arm with gentle insistence. He recoiled, pulling away. I'm fine, Sarah. No, you're not. She advanced, her eyes searching his inner landscape. You're hurting. And you don't have to endure it alone. He yearned to trust her words. He wanted to invite her in, to unburden himself of the weight of his regrets. But the ramparts he'd constructed around himself were insurmountable. He remained a prisoner, haunted by specters. I need air, he mumbled, brushing past her. He descended the steps, heading towards the barn, craving the scent of hay and loam, anything to dispel the oppressive atmosphere of the house. Sarah watched him depart, her expression a blend of sorrow and resolve. She knew Michael intimately. She knew the anguish he carried, the defenses he had erected. And she knew that dismantling them would prove the most demanding task of his life. The worn Bible. The house breathed a silence so complete, it hummed in Michael's ears. Clara and Sarah were long asleep, leaving him alone to sift through the echoes of Harding Farm. He drifted through the dim rooms, the floorboards whispering beneath his tread, each groan a lament. He wasn't sure what drove him, perhaps a fragment of his father he could hold, something beyond the yellowed snapshots and time-worn furnishings. An unseen current pulled him toward his father's bedroom. The air held a ghost of pipe tobacco and old spice, a scent that conjured a fleeting vision of the man ensconced in his armchair, a world away. Michael hadn't crossed this threshold in years. He recalled it as a haven, a place of retreat after demanding days in the fields. Now, it felt airless, heavy with unspoken grief. The nightstand was a tableau of the ordinary, a half-finished glass of water, reading spectacles, a modest brass lamp. Then he noticed it. The Bible. It was more than just a book, it was a legacy. The leather was softened by time, the gilded lettering almost entirely erased. The spine was fractured, the pages delicate as autumn leaves. A testament to years of devotion, a stark contrast to the pristine sheen of Michael's possessions. He remembered its constant presence, his father's large, weathered hand resting upon it. In his youth, it was just another fixture, a backdrop to a life he yearned to escape. He paused, his hand suspended above the volume. It embodied everything he had fought against, the unyielding principles, the steadfast belief, the simple existence he had rejected. To pick it up felt like capitulation, an admission to the man he had strived to outrun. But the magnetism was too strong. His fingers grazed the aged leather. A tremor raced down his spine. He lifted the Bible. Its weight surprised him. Dust motes swirled in the moonbeams slicing through the window. He settled on the edge of the bed, the springs yielding slightly. The room seemed smaller, the walls pressing inward. He opened the Bible, the pages sighing softly. The aroma of ancient paper and ink rose to meet him, a familiar comfort. The pages were a palimpsest of markings. Verses underlined, jottings in the margins, dates etched in faded ink. His father's script, precise and controlled, mirrored the man's character. Michael perused the passages, attempting to grasp their significance. They spoke of absolution, redemption, and unwavering faith. Concepts that felt alien, almost ludicrous, within the confines of his life. He leafed through, his pulse quickening. He sought something, anything, to offer a glimpse into his father's spirit, a connection severed long ago. He felt like a trespasser, violating sacred ground. This was not merely a book, it was a portal to a realm he had deliberately sealed himself off from. His gaze settled on a passage in John, the words highlighted in cerulean. "Peace I leave with you, my peace I give you. I do not give to you as the world gives. Do not let your hearts be troubled and do not be afraid." A knot tightened in Michael's throat. He remembered his father reciting these words, his voice serene and unwavering. He had dismissed them then as hollow sentiments. Now they resonated as a desperate entreaty, a missive from beyond. He closed the Bible, his fingers tracing the worn perimeter of the cover. He didn't comprehend. He didn't comprehend his father, his convictions, or the solace he seemed to have found within these pages. He felt only a profound sense of emptiness, a piercing regret for the time squandered. He returned the Bible to the nightstand, its presence a muted accusation. He rose, his limbs leaden. He needed air. He needed to flee the crushing weight of this room, this house, this life he had so desperately sought to abandon. He exited the bedroom, leaving the time-worn Bible behind, its secrets entombed within. He remained unsure of his next move, but one certainty solidified: he could no longer outrun his history. A letter unfolds. The Bible's ancient vellum sighed as Michael gingerly unfurled it. Sunbeams sliced through the gloom of his father's study, illuminating dancing dust. Not since childhood Sunday school, a ritual shed at the first chance, had he touched Scripture. A time-worn bookmark, plaited from what resembled desiccated corn leaves, slipped free, pirouetting to the floor. Stooping to retrieve it, his fingers encountered something unexpected, a stout, ivory envelope nestled within the book's spine. A sharp intake of breath. He lifted it, turning the object in his grip. The paper possessed a coarse texture, like rudimentary parchment. Across its face, Michael Harding was etched in a familiar, angular hand. His father's. A surge of conflicting emotions buffeted him, disbelief warring with guilt, a nascent flicker of hope. He collapsed onto the threadbare armchair beside the bed. The springs lamented beneath his weight. His pulse hammered in his chest, a frantic tattoo against the oppressive quiet of the house. He felt a powerful impulse to bolt, to flee the gravity of this unforeseen communique. Yet he remained rooted, bound by unseen chains to confront the letter's contents. His thumb traced the dried glue's faint ridge. A tremor passed through his hands as he carefully breached the seal. The musty scent of aged paper, laced with something distinctly his, drifted from within. He unfolded the letter. The sheet was fragile and ambered with age, the ink faded in places. The well-known script stretched across the page, a testament to countless hours spent poring over ledgers and harvest tallies. He began to read. Underscore my dearest Michael, underscore the words shimmered before him. Underscore my dearest Michael. Underscore not since, decades ago had he encountered those words, spoken or penned. A knot tightened in his throat, making swallowing difficult. He blinked, fighting to sharpen his vision. Underscore if you are reading this, then I am gone. I have often pondered your thoughts, your feelings, when this day arrived. My prayer is that you harbor neither anger nor regret. My hope, that you have discovered joy in your life, even if it remains beyond my grasp. Michael paused, his gaze riveted to the words. Joy. Had he truly found it? He possessed success, undoubtedly, and a life of ease. Yet genuine joy? It seemed a remote, almost unattainable ideal. He continued, his eyes devouring the page. I acknowledge our differing perspectives. I concede that my ways clashed with yours, that my tenets appeared confining to you. Perhaps they were. I am a plain man, Michael. My solace lies in the land, in the rhythm of the seasons, in the steadfast faith of our forebears. His father's prose conjured a vivid tapestry of the existence Michael had forsaken. The life from which he had deliberately distanced himself. A keen stab of guilt pierced him, a familiar ache resonating in his core. But I have also learned that multiple paths lead to grace, diverse means to lead a virtuous life. And I have come to terms with your chosen road, even if it carries you far from this ancestral farm. A tear broke free, etching a glistening trail down his cheek. He brushed it away with impatience. He hadn't wept since boyhood, scraping his knee during a tumble from the old oak in the pasture. There were times, particularly in the early years, when I was consumed by ire. Resentful of your rejection of all I cherished. Frustrated by your seeming shame of your heritage. But anger is a corrosive force, Michael. It devours the spirit, leaving only bitterness and remorse. He felt the profound truth of these words echoing within his own being. Hadn't he nurtured anger within, allowing it to taint his relationships and distort his judgment? I have devoted countless hours to supplication, Michael. Praying for your contentment, praying for your triumphs, and praying for absolution. Absolution for my own shortcomings as a parent, and for any suffering I may have inflicted. The words swam again, and this time he made no attempt to stem the tide. Tears flowed freely now, a deluge of repressed emotion unleashed after years of restraint. And I have attained that absolution. I have found serenity. And it is my deepest desire that you, too, shall discover it. He swallowed hard, his throat constricted with feeling. He could almost discern his father's voice, gentle and unwavering, permeating the hush of the room. There is nothing more I covet for you, Michael, than inner peace. To release the grip of the past, to forgive yourself, and to greet the future with an open heart. With all my love, your father. The letter concluded there. Michael fixated on those final words, his vision blurred by tears. Your father. Not dad. Not pop. Your father. A simple, yet profound avowal of love and acceptance. He clutched the letter to his chest, his frame convulsing with sobs. The burden of his regret, the years of alienation, the squandered opportunities, crashed down upon him with devastating force. He had squandered so much time, allowing pride and resentment to sever him from the man who had invariably loved him, in his own imperfect, human way. He remained there for what felt like an eternity, consumed by grief and remorse, the aged letter held fast in his grasp. The silence of the house no longer felt empty and accusatory. It resonated with the echoes of his father's enduring love, a love that had transcended mortality, reaching out to him from beyond the boundary of life. Words of regret. Michael's breath caught, his eyes tracing the familiar, yet strangely distant, calligraphy. Lamplight stretched accusing fingers across the desk, mimicking the tendrils of shadow that snaked from the parchment, tightening around his chest. My dearest Michael, his father's words declared, if this reaches your hands I am gone. And knowing my own intractable nature, I suspect my lifetime of silence will have left you with unanswered questions, perhaps even bitterness. For that, my son, I beg your forgiveness. Intractable. The word reverberated within Michael, a trait he'd scorned in Samuel, only to recognize its echo in his own decisions. Had he inherited more than just the cut of his jaw? A sharp pang of discomfort, like a sudden chill, pierced him. It had never occurred to him that his father might have acknowledged, let alone confessed, his imperfections. The subsequent lines swam before him, blurred by a rising tide of emotion. He squeezed his eyes shut, then forced them open, anchoring himself to the page. Pride, Michael, is a burdensome mantle. I wore it too long, and it crippled me, preventing the words that needed utterance. Preventing me from being the father you deserved. The weight of the declaration pressed down on him. The father he deserved. Had he ever truly contemplated that ideal? His focus had always been on Samuel's failings, the taciturn disposition, the unspoken demands, the ever-critical gaze. A particular argument surfaced, a clash from years past ignited by his announcement to leave for the city. Samuel, arms crossed like ramparts, had stood defiant, thunder brewing in his expression. So, you deem yourself too good for this place now? He challenged, the words laced with a stinging resentment. Michael had fled, vowing never to return. But now, facing this posthumous confession, a novel understanding dawned. Was pride the barricade that had separated them, a mutual stubbornness on both sides? Had he been too proud to expose his own vulnerabilities, too quick to condemn his father's perceived inadequacies? The letter continued. There are no justifications, Michael. Only the sting of regret. Regret for opportunities squandered, unspoken dialogues, and the affection I failed to communicate. I understand now that my silence was a prison, confining not only you but myself. I implore you to find forgiveness, not merely for my sake, but for your own. The phrase, for your own, struck a deep chord. This wasn't solely about absolving his father, it was about Michael's freedom. Was he prepared to carry the encumbrance of resentment for the duration of his life? The prospect was chilling. He paused, his gaze drawn to the window. The approaching dawn painted the horizon with tender washes of rose and ash. A new day beckoned, but could he truly embrace it, shackled by the specters of the past? He returned to the letter, seeking a beacon of solace amidst the grief. I know I inflicted pain, Michael, far exceeding my intentions. I was a flawed man, battling inner demons, and I, regrettably, lashed out at you. This remains my deepest remorse. Please understand that even within my silence, my love for you burned fiercely. I may not have expressed it in the manner you craved, but it remained, buried beneath layers of apprehension and insecurity. Apprehension. Insecurity. These were foreign concepts when applied to his father's image. The revelation that Samuel had been struggling with his own demons was unsettling, prompting a reevaluation of everything he thought he understood. He recalled the rare glimpses of his father's fragility, the day his mother passed, the defeated slump of his shoulders at her graveside, the tremor that lined his voice when he spoke of her. Perhaps that vulnerability had been a constant presence, veiled by a brusque exterior. He shut his eyes, conjuring his father's visage, striving to perceive beyond the severe lines and disapproving stare. Could he detect a spark of the love Samuel claimed to possess? Was it possible to reconcile the father of his memory with the man revealed in this written testament? The endeavor felt immense, almost insurmountable. But as he remained there, bathed in the nascent light of dawn, a faint ember of hope began to glow. Perhaps, just perhaps, absolution was attainable. Not only for his father's sins, but for his own. The path ahead would be arduous, but the initial stride, he recognized, involved acknowledging the profundity of his father's contrition. And that, at the very least, was a beginning. Finding faith. The next page swam into view, Samuel's familiar script suddenly foreign, burdened by an unfamiliar gravity. It felt like cradling a fragment of his father's exposed spirit. Michael, the letter proceeded, I've stumbled upon something, a revelation I dearly wish I'd encountered long ago. Faith. A harsh scoff burst from Michael, an abrupt sound swallowed by the house's silence. His father? A man of faith? Samuel Harding, who derided organized religion, deemed the church a refuge for the weak? Unthinkable. He nearly flung the letter away, suspecting a cruel jest, a final, barbed twist. Yet the careful penmanship, the raw vulnerability seeping from the ink, rooted him to the spot. He pressed on. It began subtly, Michael. A persistent ache deep within, a sense of incompletion. Your mother, bless her, always possessed unwavering belief. I never grasped it then, dismissed it as a crutch. But now a different perspective dawns. I've started attending services at the small church on Elm Street. Pastor Emily is a remarkable woman. She speaks with such conviction, such genuine care. Her sermons, they speak to me in a way nothing else ever has. She speaks of absolution, Michael. Of releasing the grip of the past, finding solace by accepting God's grace. Michael's jaw hardened. Absolution? Was this a veiled barb? One last attempt to inflict guilt? He envisioned Samuel seated in the pew, listening to Pastor Emily's homily, a smug expression playing on his lips, believing he'd found the ultimate solution. A surge of anger, scalding and familiar, coursed through him. It was always about dominance, wasn't it? Even from beyond, Samuel sought to control him. He clutched the letter tighter, the paper crackling in his grasp. He yearned to shred it, to obliterate the words, to expunge the image of his father seeking comfort in what Michael considered mere delusion. But something checked him. A tremor of uncertainty, a whisper of rationale. He recalled the lines etched around Samuel's eyes in that last photograph, the profound exhaustion that seemed to permeate his very core. Perhaps this wasn't about him at all. Maybe it was about Samuel, his own desperate quest for something to grasp as mortality closed in. He compelled himself to breathe deeply, slowing his racing pulse. He needed to grasp this. He had to know what drove his father toward religious refuge. Pastor Emily preaches that forgiveness is a gift we bestow upon ourselves, Michael. Not the individual we pardon. It's about liberating ourselves from the shackles of resentment, from bitterness's sting. It's about discovering tranquility. I'm trying, son. Desperately. A wave of giddiness assailed Michael. The words blurred, the room seemed to sway. He staggered back, slumping into the worn armchair. He felt a hollow ache blossom in his chest, a profound sense of bereavement. He pictured Samuel within those church walls, listening to Pastor Emily, wrestling with his inner demons, his own life's regrets. He imagined him in prayer, a concept Michael had never witnessed, never even contemplated. It was a deeply unsettling image, wholly contradictory to the man he thought he knew. Could it be real? Had his father genuinely changed? Had he truly discovered solace in faith? Or was it merely another act, another tactic to evade the truth? He surveyed the room, at the familiar articles that housed so many unspoken memories. The worn leather armchair, the chipped coffee table, the framed snapshots of a life he assumed he understood. But now, everything appeared altered, tainted by the letter's revelations. He squeezed his eyes shut, seeking to quell the clamor, the confusion, the overwhelming weight of guilt. He wanted to trust that his father had found peace. He longed to believe in his sincerity. But a part of him, a deeply ingrained skepticism, refused to surrender. He knew he had to delve deeper. He had to speak with Pastor Emily. He needed to discern what truly transpired in his father's final years. Perhaps then, just maybe, he could begin to offer forgiveness. Not just to Samuel, but also to himself. Unsent messages. Michael reopened the letter, the flimsy paper whispering in the otherwise still house. The kitchen clock's tick was a metronome counting out the decay of his composure. He skipped past the forced piety, those stiff professions of faith that felt so foreign. He needed the core of it, the reason. He needed to unearth the man he remembered, the one who mocked holy water and wrote prayer, entombed beneath these sanctimonious phrases. Then he found it, a line nestled almost timidly on the second page. "I've been watching you, Michael." A sudden coldness gripped his spine. A stalker? Had Samuel spied on him outside his work? Tracked him down city streets? The idea felt ludicrous, yet dread remained. The next paragraph offered a warped explanation, though it did nothing to ease the churning in his gut. "You probably think I haven't noticed a thing, but I have. I saw the article about your promotion. The photo of you looking like you owned the world. Triumphant. Just as your mother would have loved. I kept that newsprint. Top drawer of my desk, beneath the overdue bills. I wanted to call to say I was proud too. But..." The sentence withered, incomplete. His father. Proud? He struggled to square the stern, critical man he knew with this clandestine admirer. His heart hammered. But fear stopped me. The fear you'd slam the phone down. Tell me to rot like you did that last time. I earned it, I know. Still, it doesn't sting any less. A raw ache filled Michael's eyes. He recalled that final call, or rather, that brutal exchange. 23, fresh from law school, fueled by self-righteousness and youthful conviction. Samuel had scorned his career path, accused him of hypocrisy. Michael had countered with every wounding barb he could conjure, resurrecting years of bitterness and parental neglect. He'd ended the conversation with a ringing slam and a vow of silence. A vow kept for 15 years. The letter pressed on, each word a renewed torment. I tried, Michael. Heaven knows I tried. So many times I grabbed the phone, punched in your number. Heard it ringing, my pulse a frantic drum. And then your voice on the machine, that sterile, professional greeting, drained my courage. I hung up before you knew. Nausea crested. Those missed calls. So many. He'd seen the unknown numbers bloom on the display, felt a ripple of curiosity, then dismissed them as errors or marketers. He'd been too busy, too significant, to bother with the unknown. Now, the truth of those lost connections crashed down with physical force. Every ignored ring a squandered chance, a possible bridge, a lifeline ignored. Samuel wrote of seeing Michael across from the courthouse downtown. Watching him emerge with a client, his briefcase swinging with assurance. You look so confident, so accomplished. I wanted to rush over and embrace you, tell you how much pride I felt. But I couldn't. Just an old man in a faded coat, lurking in the shadows. I didn't want to shame you. Shame him? Michael dragged a hand over his face, the burning in his eyes intensifying. His father, a man who had never exhibited weakness, had feared embarrassing him? The sheer absurdity was almost unbearable. The letter concluded abruptly, with a simple, devastating entreaty. I just wanted you to know that I loved you, Michael. More than I ever learned how to say. Michael slumped in his seat, the letter drifting to the floor. The kitchen tilted, familiar shapes dissolving into blurry abstractions. The weight of his remorse was immense, suffocating. He'd spent so long erecting defenses, cultivating anger, clinging to resentment. He told himself he was shielding himself from his father's harmful influence. But all he had done was deny himself the chance to truly know him, to comprehend him, to offer forgiveness. And now, it was irrevocably late. He gazed at the fallen letter, at the shaky script brimming with unspoken anguish. He pictured his father, hunched at his desk, battling his demons, bearing his soul on the page. He saw him reaching for the phone, his hand quivering, his voice caught. He imagined the click of the disconnect, the ensuing silence, the crushing weight of rejection. And he wept. He wept for his father, for himself, for all the stolen years, for all the unspoken words, for all the love buried beneath layers of pride and acrimony. He wept for the voicemails unsent, now destined to remain unheard. Unconditional love. This letter felt different, substantial in his palm. Creamy paper, dated only a month before Samuel's passing. Michael unfolded it with reverence, as if it were a sacred scroll. The handwriting wobbled, the ink a faded sky blue. My dearest Michael, if you hold this, I lack the courage to speak these truths aloud. A coward's confession granted. Yet perhaps written words will bear the weight they merit, unmarred by the rancor that often soured our talks. Michael swallowed, his throat constricted. He girded himself. I've done much soul-searching lately, Michael. About life, faith, and us. You know I wasn't always devout. Your mother, God rest her, practically hauled me into church each Sunday. I went to appease her, not from any inner conviction. Her departure changed things. The house rang with emptiness, but my heart echoed even louder. I began reading her old Bible, the one softened by years on her nightstand. Within those Psalms and Gospels, something dawned on me, boundless love. Not the conditional affection we casually dispense, the I love you if variety. But a love accepting you, imperfections and all, without a single string attached. God's love. Michael paused, his eyes prickling. His father, discussing God? It felt utterly alien. He'd always viewed Samuel as a pragmatist, a man wedded to logic and the tangible. It took a while to sink in, Michael. Stubborn old fool that I am. I kept trying to earn it, to find some loophole, some prerequisite I had to fulfill. That's not how it functions. It's freely given, offered without expectation of repayment. It overlooks our errors, our failings, our weaknesses, seeing instead the potential, the inherent goodness, residing within each of us. Michael's breath caught. Was this his father's oblique apology? And that, my son, is the very love I harbor for you. Unconditional. I haven't always expressed it well, I know. My pride, my temper, often interfered. But beneath the gruff exterior, a profound and unwavering affection resided. A love swelling with pride at your triumphs, even when I feigned indifference. A love aching with sadness at our fractured bond. He could almost hear Samuel's voice now, raspy and weathered, imbued with a tenderness rarely displayed in person. I never grasped your choices, Michael. Leaving the family enterprise, seeking a life in the metropolis, surrounded by, let's just say, individuals I didn't comprehend. I desired you to follow in my footsteps, to build something lasting here, where you belong. But that was my ambition, not yours. Somewhere, I conflated the two. I now see you needed to chart your own course, discover your own purpose. And you've achieved that, Michael. You've constructed a life, a prosperous one, by all accounts. Though I didn't always endorse your methods, I admired your grit, your drive. You were always a resolute young man. Michael's vision blurred. He swiped at his eyes with the back of his hand, smudging the ink slightly. More significantly, I embrace your decisions. I embrace you as you are, not as the person I envisioned. That's the essence of unconditional love, Michael. Releasing expectations, preconceived notions, and embracing the individual before you, complete with all their flaws. I know I wounded you, Michael. Profoundly. I am truly remorseful for that. That regret has been a constant companion, a weight upon my spirit. I hope, in time, you can find forgiveness in your heart. Not for my benefit, but for your own liberation. To free yourself from the bitterness that has poisoned our relationship for so long. Know this, Michael, you are loved. Unconditionally. Always have been, always will be. And whatever transpires, wherever life leads you, that love will endure, a constant in your existence. With all my love, Dad. The letter escaped Michael's trembling grip, fluttering to the carpet. He stared, the words dissolving into an illegible blur. A sob broke free, a raw, visceral sound reverberating in the silent room. Unconditional love. A concept he'd always battled, an alien tongue in the landscape of his guarded heart. He'd erected ramparts around himself, brick by brick, convinced love invariably demanded a price, carrying expectations and obligations. Yet here, in his father's final testament, was something different. A love transcending their differences, their conflicts, their years of estrangement. A love absolving his sins, not out of desert, but because that was love's nature. With sudden, piercing clarity, he grasped the depth of his father's devotion. Samuel hadn't simply tolerated his shortcomings. He'd actively chosen acceptance, embracing him even when it defied his core beliefs. And Michael, in his obdurate pride, had spurned that gift, pushed it away, believing he was safeguarding himself. He had been so wrong. So tragically, devastatingly wrong. He retrieved the letter, his fingers tracing the faded script. "I love you too, Dad," he choked out, his voice thick with grief. "I'm so sorry." The words hung, unanswered, swallowed by the house's silence. Yet, deep within Michael's soul, a seedling of hope pushed through the soil. A hope for reconciliation, for absolution, for a future unburdened by the past. And he knew, with a certainty resonating in his core, that his true journey had only just begun. A passage of peace. The church swelled with attendees, a tapestry woven with Havenwood familiars and faces Michael hadn't glimpsed in decades, cohorts from his youth, his father's former associates, even Mrs. Davison, her silver updo immaculate. He stood at the lectern, polished with a cool contrast against his fingertips' anxiety. A nervous tremor pulsed through his hands, one he willed to stillness. The heft of his father's Bible felt substantial, significant. Pastor Emily Carter's comforting cadence had just concluded her eulogy, recounting Samuel's civic dedication and understated generosity, facets Michael hadn't fully appreciated. He cleared his throat, the sound booming in the sudden hush. His gaze scanned the gathering, lingering on Sarah Jenkins, who offered a subtle, encouraging nod from the third pew. "Dad, he wasn't verbose," Michael began, his voice raspy. "Action was his language." A faint smile flickered across his face. "Building, mending, creating things that endured." He opened the Bible, the aroma of aged paper and treated leather swirling around him. It fell open to a much-loved passage, underlined repeatedly in faded blue. He hadn't held this book in ages, hadn't known it still existed. Religion didn't define him, Michael continued, but these words offered him comfort. He adjusted the microphone and began to read, his voice gaining strength with each line. "Therefore, if you are offering your gift at the altar and there remember that your brother or sister has something against you, leave your gift there in front of the altar. First go and be reconciled to them, then come and offer your gift." Matthew 5 verses 23 to 24. He raised his head, his eyes meeting Sarah's again. "He underscored this," he observed, his voice catching. "Time and again." Michael traced the worn page. "I discovered this Bible in his study last night. Along with something unexpected." A wave of quiet anticipation rolled through the pews. Michael drew a steadying breath. "Our relationship, my father and I, it was intricate," he admitted, the understatement palpable. "Unspoken grievances, unspanned divides. But recently, a change occurred. He began corresponding." Michael paused, his throat constricting. Letters of affection. Letters of contrition. Letters of empathy. He glanced at the Bible again, tracing a long-forgotten coffee ring on the yellowed leaf. "This passage, it's about reconciliation. About the vital importance of mending broken bonds, of offering and accepting forgiveness. About finding serenity." He connected with the gaze of an elderly woman in the front row, her face a landscape of sorrow. "For much of his life, my father constructed a barrier between us," he voiced softly. "A bulwark of pride, of obstinacy, of assumptions left unvoiced. But ultimately, he summoned the strength to dismantle it. He gathered the courage to reach out." Michael closed the Bible, the sound resonating in the silent sanctuary. "He attained a sense of peace. And in doing so, he gave me the chance to find my own." He moved back from the lectern, the Bible's weight now a link, not a liability. He had spoken truthfully, and a lightness bloomed within him. Catching Sarah's eye as he returned to his seat, he received a silent nod, a validation of the journey ahead. Seated, the service played out around him, but Michael was transported. He was back in his father's study, the musty scent of aged paper and ink enveloping him, the echo of his father's sentiments reverberating within. He had spoken of reconciliation. Now, the demanding work of enacting it truly began. Healing the wounds. The last few mourners dispersed, leaving Michael alone beside the raw earth. Lilies and damp soil perfumed the air, an odd pairing of endings and new beginnings. He watched Sarah offer quiet words to some lingering acquaintances, her hand a fleeting comfort on his sleeve. The weight in his chest hadn't vanished, but it had softened, reconfiguring into something gentler. He recalled the letter's closing lines, seared into his memory with unexpected force. "I hope you can forgive me, Michael. And more importantly, forgive yourself. Know that I loved you, always." Forgiveness, the very idea reverberated in the hushed stillness of the cemetery, glancing off granite markers and rustling through the ancient boughs overhead. For years, it had seemed an impassable gulf, a divide too immense to span. Now, in this letter, his father had constructed a bridge, fragile perhaps, but nonetheless crossable. The choice to venture forth was his. Sarah approached, her gaze tender. Ready? He nodded, carefully stowing the letter in his coat. It radiated a comforting warmth against his heart, a physical link to a man he had believed irrevocably lost. As they headed toward the gates, the setting sun splashed the sky with vibrant strokes of apricot and amethyst, a spectacular valediction. I suppose I should start sorting through his things, Michael murmured, the words heavier than intended. Sarah squeezed his hand. No rush. Take all the time you need. A wan smile flickered across his face. Easier said than done? The house, it's saturated with him. Then proceed slowly. A room at a time. And I'm here to help, should you want it. The offer, unadorned and heartfelt, unleashed a fresh wave of emotion. He hadn't fully grasped how much he yearned for connection, the need to share this crushing burden. Thanks, Sarah. That means a lot. They walked on in silence, the only sound the crisp grind of gravel underfoot. Reaching the car, Michael halted, glancing back at the burial ground. His father's resting place was hidden from view, yet he knew it resided there, a humble plot marking the conclusion of a tangled existence. He inhaled deeply, the crisp air filling his lungs. The burden on his chest seemed to ease with each exhalation. Grief remained, shadowed by regret, but a nascent seed of hope had also taken root. The drive to his father's house passed in near silence. Sarah switched on the radio, but the music felt jarring, and she muted it promptly. Michael gazed out the window, the landscape a blur of green and brown. His thoughts spiraled back to the letter, to the man who penned it. The father he'd known was a stern, unyielding presence, swift to reprimand and hesitant to praise. But those words unveiled a different aspect, a vulnerable, contrite soul seeking absolution. What catalyst had sparked this transformation? What drove his father to find solace in the scriptures, to finally grapple with the demons that had tormented him for so long? He realized that some answers might forever remain elusive, but the questions themselves possessed value, offering a path toward understanding his father, and himself, at a profound level. As he turned into the driveway, Michael felt a familiar unease prickle his skin. The house loomed before him, a silent sentinel guarding the secrets of bygone days. Confronting those secrets would be far from simple, but avoidance was no longer viable. He owed it to his father, and he owed it to himself. Sarah followed him inside, her presence a reassuring touchstone amid the swirling memories. The house was precisely as he remembered, cluttered, dusty, tinged with the lingering aroma of his father's pipe. I'll put the kettle on, Sarah offered, heading toward the kitchen. Why don't you just sit for a moment? He nodded, collapsing into the worn armchair in the living room. The chair felt intimately familiar, imprinted with the contours of his father's form. He closed his eyes, inhaling the comforting scent, striving to conjure a vivid image of his father's face. He saw the etched lines around his eyes, the stubborn set of his jaw, the fleeting hint of a smile. He also saw the deep-seated sadness that had shadowed him for so long. Reaching into his pocket, he withdrew the letter. He unfolded it with care, smoothing away the creases. As he reread the words, a sensation of tranquility began to permeate his being. It wasn't a complete cure, not yet, but it was a beginning. A tenuous bridge had been erected, and he was finally prepared to venture across. He surveyed the room, at the familiar relics that housed so many memories, the books lining the shelves, the photographs adorning the mantel, the old clock ticking with unwavering rhythm on the wall. He understood that the journey ahead would be lengthy and arduous, but also that he wasn't alone. He had Sarah, and he had the memory of his father, not as the stern, unyielding figure he had always known, but as a man who had ultimately discovered peace and offered him the gift of forgiveness. And that was sufficient for the moment. He would honor that memory, and he would live a life that merited it. He would tend to those wounds, one careful step at a time.